Last Tuesday night, I'm out with Naomi, walking the dogs. She said something, as she often does, that stuck with me. We were talking about the next few months, how our Friday nights were going to be swallowed up by other commitments. And she got this look on her face, a little sad, a little wistful. I'm bummed we won't see them for a while, she said. Them, meaning the friends that we've made over the past 3 years. The new ones. The ones we actually chose. And here's what struck me. We used to treasure Friday nights alone. That was the goal. Get through the week, close the door, 2 of us. Now we feel a lack when too much time passes without seeing these people. Something shifted, and I wanted to understand what and why. Because, So I did what I do these days. I went looking for research. And I stumbled into a sociology paper about how humans form what researchers call chosen family, which, if you're picturing a group of sociologists sitting around naming things, is actually one of their better efforts, chosen family. What they mean is the people who aren't related to you by blood or law, but who become your actual support system, your people. And buried in all that academic language, and there was a lot of it because, sociologists apparently get paid by the syllable, there was this observation that really stuck out for me. We get 2 major chances in life to build these relationships. 2 windows. 2 eras. The first one happens in your 20s. College, early career, that period when you're surrounded by other people who are also figuring out who they are. And friendships form almost by accident. You live down the hall from someone, you work the same terrible job, you're both lost at the same party. Proximity does the heavy lifting there. And that second era where those friendships form, that's now. The third, after the kids launch or are launching, after the career stops defining your calendar, after all the situational friendships that were really about whose kid was on whose soccer team. And all those situational friendships, they dissolve because the season ended and nobody scheduled a reunion. Anyway, here's the part that really stood out. The paper called the years in between, the parenting years, what I think of as the adulting years, the interregnum. That's a word my mentor Ken Kramars used to use, so it's kind of sticky for me. It's a word historians use for the gap between 2 reigns, like when a king dies and the next one hasn't been crowned yet. Leave it to academics to describe your 30s and 40s as a period of temporary vacancy. But really, it kind of fits. It's a holding pattern, a time when most of us are surrounded by people, but maybe not actually close to them. When our calendars are packed, but our hearts feel weirdly lacking. I thought about my own life, the barbecues that were really about the kids and their friends, the neighborhood dinners where I knew everyone's contractor situation but not their worries, the years of friendship that were actually logistics with the occasional dad joke thrown in. I'd spent 2 decades building something that looked like community but was actually scaffolding, and now my scaffolding was coming down. Hi, I'm Steve Gershik, and this is Your Third, the show for those of us who spent decades building, raising, handling, and achieving, and then looked up one day and thought, okay, now what? In an earlier episode of this podcast, I talked about letting go of friendships that stopped fitting, the grief of relationships that don't explode but quietly deflate. Today I want to talk about what comes next, how friendship actually works differently in this chapter, and why the rules that built your social life at 25 won't necessarily work in your 50s and beyond. Hey, if you're finding the show useful, please subscribe wherever you're listening. That's the single best thing you can do to help other people who are thinking about their third find us. And if you want to go deeper on these topics between episodes, I'm writing a weekly Substack, under your third. I'd love to see you there if you want to subscribe. Now, back to friendship. Let me break down what the research says about this, because I found it kind of comforting. Era 1 happens during what psychologists call emerging adulthood, which is, I think, their way of saying your 20s, but in a way that justifies a research grant, roughly 18 to 29. This is when your social network is at its largest. You're meeting people constantly, you're trying on new identities, you're figuring out who you are by bouncing off of other people who are doing the same thing. And here's the key. Proximity is doing most of the work. There's a study, and I swear I'm not making this up, that found that students randomly assigned to sit next to each other in a classroom reported stronger friendships a year later than students who sat further apart. That's it. That's the magic formula. Someone got a research grant to find that out. You were nearby. I imagine the researchers celebrated this finding with great fanfare and then sat down next to each other and became best friends. Your college friends, your first job friends, the weird but wonderful crew from the apartment building with the broken elevator, these relationships form because you were there at the same time, going through the similar things, eating ramen and sitting on the floor and using milk crates as bookshelves. You didn't necessarily choose each other based on deep compatibility. You chose each other because you were available and the timing worked. Now, this isn't a criticism. These friendships can be real and lasting, but they were built on a foundation of convenience that most of us probably never reflected on. And then life happens, marriage, kids, career maybe. The interregnum begins. You know, the adulting years, the parenting years are this strange social experience, and I say this as someone who went through it a bunch of times, so I have plenty of data. You're surrounded by people, school events, sports sidelines, choir recitals, neighborhood gatherings, work functions. Your calendar's full. Your contact list on your phone is enormous. You know 40 people's names and what grades their kids are in, and sometimes you feel a little lonely. But here's what I'm learning. That is totally normal. That is the structure working as designed. The problem is that many of us spent these years assuming that these were real friendships. We thought the other soccer parents were our people, that the people at work who take the same lunch in the same break room with us, they're our people. We confused frequency of contact with the depth of connection. And then the kids leave, the job changes, the context disappears. And suddenly you're looking around wondering, where'd everybody go? They didn't go anywhere. The scaffolding came down and revealed what was always true. These were situational connections, not your true chosen family. Now here's the good news, and I actually mean that because I think the first 9 minutes of this episode were maybe a little bit of a downer. Era 2 is not a diminished version of Era 1. It's actually better. Or at least that's what the research suggests. And I'm starting to believe it. See, in your 20s, proximity did the choosing. You were friends with whoever was around. In your 50s and beyond, you get to be intentional. You get to pick people based on who you actually are now. Not who you were when you still thought cargo shorts were a defensible fashion choice. There's a psychological theory that explains what's happening here. It's called socio-emotional selectivity theory, which sounds less like a finding and more like a diagnosis. I'm sorry, Mr. Gershik, but you have socio-emotional selectivity. Is it treatable? No, but on the bright side, you'll have fewer friends and they'll be better. Here's what it actually says, this theory. When you're young, time feels infinite, so you optimize for breadth. Meet lots of people, gather information, keep your options open. As we get older, we start to feel the finiteness of time, and that shifts what we're looking for. We stop caring about the size of our network, and we start caring about the depth. We get selective. You prune, not because you're bitter or antisocial, but because you're finally clear about what and who actually matters to you. The research calls this selective pruning. I call it growing up. In Era 1, the question was, who's around? In Era 2, the question is, who shares what I actually care about? This is a fundamental shift, and it caught me off guard when I started thinking about it, because it means the old playbook doesn't help much these days. The friends of Era 2 are not going to appear because you happen to live near them or work with them. Maybe they do. But those old systems are gone, or at least they're not reliable anymore. You have to go find them. But here's the trick. You find them through shared passion, not forced networking. The research points to something that's kind of obvious once you see it. People in their third form lasting friendships through gardening clubs, book groups, workout classes, volunteer organizations, men's or women's groups, community choirs, hiking crews, anywhere that shared interest creates a natural reason to keep showing up. And this isn't advice, by the way, to join more clubs. It's just an observation about how friendship actually works at our age. You're not looking for people who are conveniently located. You're looking for people who care about the same things you care about. People who want to talk about what you want to talk about. Maybe people who are interested in large talk, not just small talk. Proximity got you here. But in this era of life, passion does the work. So I've been reading all this research, and I keep thinking, okay, but what does this actually feel like, in practice? Because it's one thing to read about socio-emotional selectivity and nod along, mentally calculating how many points in Scrabble that might be. It's another thing to be standing in your kitchen on a Wednesday night wondering if you should text someone you met at a men's group and invite them to dinner. That happened to me. A few months ago, I had been going to this men's group I'm part of, and I connected with this guy during the sessions. Real conversations, the kind where you forget to check the time. And afterward, I thought, I want to know this guy better. And then I did nothing for 2 weeks. Because here's the thing, making friends in your 50s, it kind of feels a lot like dating. There's a little bit of that same awkward energy. Do I text? Is it too soon? Are they going to think I'm weird? Am I going to suggest dinner and they're going to be like, oh, I thought this was a group thing. I didn't realize you meant dinner. I finally texted him. We had dinner. It was great. And afterward, I realized I'd been overthinking it in a way I wouldn't have in my 20s. At 25, I would have said, hey, want to grab a beer? And not thought about it twice. At my age, I drafted 3 versions of a text message. 3, for a dinner invite to a grown man. But that's the work of this era, I think. You have to be willing to feel a little foolish, to risk the small embarrassment of reaching out, because the friendships that matter now don't form by accident. They form because somebody decided to be brave enough to say, I like talking to you. Can we do more of that? I'm still figuring this out. I don't have 3 elegant principles to share, but what I do have is the experience of standing in my kitchen, staring at my phone, typing and deleting and typing again, and eventually hitting send and being glad that I did. I want to share one more idea from the research because it gave me a useful way to think about all this. The researchers, they have this concept called social convoy. Picture this. Picture 3 concentric circles around you. The inner circle, the people you can't imagine your life without. The ones you'd call at 3 a.m. The ones who know the real story, not the social media version of you. In the middle circle, the people who matter but aren't central. Good friends, important connections, people you genuinely like. And then the outer circle, people you'd call close, but who are really more like familiar acquaintances. Friendly, not necessarily friends. Here's what happens in your third. The convoy reorganizes. Some people move inward. Someone you knew casually for years suddenly becomes one of your real people. because you finally have the time and space to actually know each other. Some people move outward, and that's not loss, that's honesty. And some new people appear who weren't in the convoy at all. That's what happened with Naomi and me. The friends she was missing on those Friday nights, those friends weren't in our convoy 5 years ago. They weren't even on our radar. And now they're people we feel lack without. I guess the mistake is thinking that your convoy should stay fixed. Rubber Ducky, remember that song? I don't think it should stay fixed. It should evolve, as we evolve. When Naomi said she was bummed about missing those Friday nights, she was naming something I'd been feeling but hadn't articulated to myself. My parenting years gave me a lot of things. They also gave me a social structure that is like a library book. It was time to return it. For a while, I didn't realize it. A little overdue. I thought the friendships were the friendships. I didn't understand that they were scaffolding. Now we're building something different, more intentional, smaller maybe, but deeper, based on who we actually are today, not the we that we were in our 30s. Our first era was a gift we didn't know we were receiving. The second era, well, that's a choice that we're making. That research paper called this the second era of chosen family. Still testing whether that's true for me, but so far, the evidence is Friday nights. So here's what I invite you to try. Think about your social convoy, the 3 circles. Write down who's actually in each one. Not who you think should be in there, but who's there. And then ask yourself, are these the people I chose, or the people proximity chose for me? No judgment, just honesty. And if you notice some gaps in that inner circle, maybe ask yourself, what do I actually care about now? And where might I find people who care about the same things? The friends of your third are out there, but they're not going to show up by accident. And proximity isn't working for you anymore. Passion is. So go find your people. And if this episode resonated, subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. That's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on what's next. And if you want to keep the conversation going between episodes, I'm on Substack at Your Third. You might even find me on TikTok if you use that platform. Next episode, we're going somewhere I've been avoiding, but the thread continues. Everything on the show is really about the same thing. Becoming the person you actually are, and then building a life that fits. I'm Steve Gershik, and this is Our Third. Talk to you again soon.